Welcome to the Digital Marketing Insights podcast, brought to you by Brightside Digital.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to say today we have Ronan with us, who is a multi-channel sub-editor. Ronan, how you doing?
I'm very good, Thomas. Thanks very much for having me. How are you keeping?
Yeah, I'm very good, buddy. And yeah, really appreciate you coming on the show. I think a lot of people will value your insight. So Ronan, I'd like to start by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career to date, please?
Okay, Thomas. Well, bit about myself. I'm from Dublin, Ireland. I was always interested in journalism, even through secondary school. My dad used to bring home the newspapers. He'd always bring home a broadsheet and a tabloid, and I used to get a lot of enjoyment actually out of the tabloids back then for the sport, you know. But so that was a big contributing factor to me deciding what I wanted to go into after school, because nothing was really standing out at all. So I remember I applied on the CAO to do a journalism course. Didn't get enough points, so I did a PLC course in Ballyfermot College, a 2-year course for print journalism. I'm sure they've changed the title of it now because print journalism itself would sound a bit dated. So yeah, so I did that course. While I did work experience during that course, I did work experience with the Irish Daily Star. On the back of that work experience, I started writing some football articles, and they invited me in to do some sub editing shifts. So that was the start of the relationship there, which I was working there full time when my college course ended. I started working there full time as a sub editor in sport and also a sports writer. So I've written about, say, soccer, GAA, mixed martial arts, namely UFC, over the years. But my key discipline would be in sub editing. I finished up with the Star. Very happy, very amicable ending on New Year's Day 2018. And for the last few years, I've been with the Irish Independent, working as a multi-channel sub editor. But it's different to what I was doing in the Star. In the Star, I was on the sports department. With the Irish Independent, I'm in the news department.
And how do you find that transition from more sports-based journalism into more kind of news, general news?
Well, so as a sub editor, the reporter writes the article. You take it. If grammatical things need to be fixed up, or if parts of it need to be rewritten, you do all of that. You put the headline on it. A nice catchy headline that you hope will drag the reader in. And oftentimes you're working to like spatial constraints, like a box on a page. Obviously, the move to online has changed that. The space issue is not what it used to be. But to answer your question, the change from sport to news, I've really enjoyed it. I love sport, but news is more varied, so you could be editing something to do with a Irish political scandal here, or a global news story, or the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It could be something to do with the pandemic. So I do enjoy that it's varied, and it's just about being a sub editor. It's about being a complete and utter stickler for the smallest of details, and obviously the more obvious ones too. So ideally you want an article to be sent to print, with no mistakes, with no errors. Sometimes we're humans, we're not robots. Mistakes get through, but the aim is for the highest standards.
And the question I was going to ask you there was around research. Do you need to have like a good understanding, especially previously in your sport kind of role, your more sport in writing role? I suppose you had to have an in-depth knowledge to kind of counter-argue and maybe not necessarily opinion pieces, but to understand the sports and different things that happen. But with general news, is there an expectation to be well-versed in several areas before you? I know you're sub-editing at the moment, but is there an expectation to be a knowledgeable in that area?
Yeah, massively so. So you'd want to have all the basics down, just so like when you're coming close to deadline, you don't have to go searching for information to verify absolutely everything.
Yeah.
But it is important to verify information you're not sure of, whether that's ringing the reporter if you can't get onto the reporter, or if it's an article that you've taken from a world news feed, such as the Associated Press or the Guardian. They can make mistakes too. Not that they don't often, but you can't. The job of the sub editor is that you don't trust anything you read. You have to just clarify everything. So whether that's going online and checking, and if it's something you're really unsure about, one clarification is generally not enough. You try to get this information appearing from multiple sources. It's like a reporter says when they're breaking an exclusive. A lot of the time, if you have that information from one source, it's not really enough. You want it from multiple sources. So yeah, a grounding in the information, whether it's Irish politics, who are the key people in ministerial positions, what's the lie of the land politically. They're just things you need to know. You need to know where we're at with the pandemic, where we're at with the war in Ukraine, where we're at with the American political situation. What the Republicans have control of, what the Democrats have control of, all those things. It's really important to have a grasp of that, before you even start. And then obviously your command of the language and how it should appear in written form should be very good. But you're not trying to produce stuff that reads like scholarly articles. Stuff that's easily digestible by a reader. So you're trying to find a happy medium.
And obviously, you kind of alluded to it earlier around the kind of transition into digital and probably the reduction in traditional paper sales of print. But is there a requirement from a journalist point of view, and like obviously the businesses themselves, but to really improve their awareness and influence digitally? Is that something that's recommended to yourselves? Like, for example, yourself, Ronan, are you encouraged to share articles and improve your own work as well as the companies you're involved with?
Yeah, I'm not encouraged to, like, on my own personal feed in the Twitter feeds, like.
Yeah, exactly. As an example, yeah.
No, that wouldn't be so important, but the digital side of it now, of course, is absolutely massive. That's the way the industry is gone. That's the future. It's not the future; it's the now. Um, our print side is still important. We still work to a print deadline. We're growing our our digital subscription base, and with a digital subscription for the Irish Independent, you do get the newspaper every day to your phone. While it's not the printed version, it's still the newspaper.
Yeah.
So it's still really important in that way. We're still working to that nightly deadline, but the online side of things is has taken over in a big way, to the point that even like headlines for articles that go online have to be different to headlines that appear in print. They have to be the headlines that appear online have to be a bit more kind of obvious and to the point. You might see a nuanced headline in a newspaper that just doesn't really work online. So it's straight to the point, names mentioned, key names mentioned. We're not necessarily encouraged to share articles on our own social media feeds, but we all have an acute awareness of just how important the digital side of it is for us, because we're constantly trying to grow the subscription market there, and it is doing well for us. It's a hard time at the moment to be in the media. I feel as though there's a lot of negativity towards it out there. There's also a lot of positivity out there. People understand the importance of media in a free country. But if you go on Twitter, and Twitter is not a reflection to me of society, but there'd be a lot of angry people on Twitter giving out about the media, and you would often see, why aren't the media covering this? Even though most of the time when they say that, the media is covering it.
Yeah.
So I've probably moved away from your question a bit there, but we are all acutely aware of the importance of digital. It doesn't really filter over into our own social media channels, but we write headlines and sub headlines, and we write articles in the knowledge that this is how it will best appear online. So if that answers.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think it's just interesting. I just wanted to gauge, I suppose, what the communication might be to journalists like yourselves at the moment. And if that was a side of things, I know, like a lot of those papers that you've mentioned, they do unbelievable work in scaling their work and getting awareness digitally. So it's quite interesting to see if there's an expectation for journalists as well to kind of do that. But what I find quite interesting about your work is especially in your time in sport, you've covered some of the biggest sporting moments of the last 20 years, especially from an Irish point of view. Is there any campaign or any work that you're really proud of, or moments that you've wrote about that you always reflect on and say, oh, wow, that was it. That was a great moment?
I suppose when I covered some Conor McGregor fights in the United States, and the one that stands out is when he fought Khabib Nurmagomedov in October 2018. It's still the biggest fight in UFC history in terms of pay-per-view subscriptions. It was through the roof, 2.5 million pay-per-view subscriptions. The next biggest to that is like another McGregor fight, 1.8 million, 1.6 million. But UFC fights generally get a pay-per-view subscriptions of well under 1 million, So this was just been a lot of bad blood boiling. So I was over in Las Vegas covering this for the Irish Independent, the Evening Herald, and the Irish Daily Star. So I was gone from the start at that stage, but we come to an agreement that I would provide them with copies. So like for a few days before the fight, the day of the fight, from the fight, and then the day after. So that was actually extremely challenging because I was pumping out so much copy for 3 different publications. That was more with a sort of it wasn't necessarily with a instant online audience in mind. It was largely geared towards the newspapers, although immediately after the fight itself, I did provide articles that were for immediately online. But when I think back, that stands out because I feel as though I was just constantly writing for the 5 days I was over there for that.
Of course. And in terms of a setup like that, how would you? Because obviously those UFC fights, you have the cage there, so it's limited visibility, and I'm kind of going with the at the moment. Would you be one of these journalists that are writing at the time, producing content on the fly? Would you be writing your pieces there and then, or would you, just because of deadlines, or is it something that you'd go to it, you'd view it, you'd take notes, and then write straight after?
You see, because like I provided some copy for the Irish Independent back in Dublin that night, but they were on top of that as well because of the time difference. Because the fight was taking place at in Las Vegas, like it would have been say about 5 a.m. in Ireland. So that was actually that was the one thing that was in my favor. I wasn't having to send out a load of copy straight away. Because for newspapers, I was providing some online content, but the main reason why I was over there on that assignment was to provide copy for the actual print editions of the newspapers. And obviously at 5 a.m. that day's newspaper had already gone, so I had the day really to do. The least challenging day was the day of the fight, believe it or not. Up to that, it was the content and trying to create different content each day and trying to create different angles from what was being said. There was so much madness at the fight itself, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but McGregor lost, and after the fight, Khabib jumped into the crowd, and three of Khabib's guys ran in and into the octagon, and they didn't give the belt to Khabib there and then because Dana White, the UFC president, thought there was going to be a riot. Now it was a bit late for that because it was spreading like wildfire. There was just riots going on all around me. It was a really toxic environment, which Conor McGregor really had an awful lot to answer for. He had worked up such a nasty environment in the build up to that fight that I really felt as though much of that was down to him. But so there really was no issue providing copy there and then for that, but it wasn't, in terms of most of what I was providing, it wasn't needed there and then at the event. Although I did previously go to, say, for example, another UFC event, UFC Fight Night 46 in Dublin in 2014 for the Irish Daily Star, because that was taking place on a Saturday night at a reasonable kind of time. I was producing copy kind of there and then and sending it through to the sports desk to have it for the following day's newspaper.
That's incredible. Yeah, I'm just trying to get like an idea of the setup of how you would how that kind of big event content is done, and in terms of being part of a press association on these days, do you ever have to interview the sports stars, or is that done by a different journalist set, or is that something that you've done in your career as well?
Yeah, I've done it after. I wouldn't have extensively covered soccer and JA matches, but yeah, there's a. It's all very. It's always very coordinated, even down to League of Ireland level. When a reporter goes to a match, they send in their report, and then afterwards they go down towards the mixed zone for other reporters. They're generally fed, maybe a player off each team and the manager off to each team. So those things are agreements in advance that the media has to be given people to talk to. Um, it's gotten to a level where you can't really seek out your own person on a UFC level. After the event is over, somewhere in the same building or a building nearby, if it's the United States, there'll be a press conference where fighters will come out and talk to you, and Dana White, for example, will come out and talk to you. So those things are very coordinated. It's not like it would have been once upon a time where you have to go scrounging for people, wait outside the dressing rooms and hope that somebody will give you a quote. In most sports that want any level of exposure now, you are fed personalities, you're fed sports people. The other side to that, the problem with that is that all sport is so sanitized now, and sports people, even to Gaelic football level, amateur sport, they're all so media trained, and it's very rare that you come across a really outstanding quotes piece where a sports person is just let loose. They're all so guarded now, but that's the way it's all gone. Even even if a newspaper or an online outlet gets an interview with a person on a random day and it's not even ahead of an event, it's basically because they're promoting a product. So a car company or a food company has paid for it, and but the sports person doesn't want to say a great deal. They just want to get their money for the plug and offer a few quotes. Generally, they're quite mundane. So that's the other side of the way things have gone.
It sounds like you've experienced that kind of transition, that moment as well. Do you think that's partly down to social media? And the second part of that question, do you think it's kind of ruined personalities in sport a little bit? Are they too trained, and so there's no real personality or enigmas in the game anymore?
Yeah, I think it's happened gradually over time, but there was even more personalities when I started out, kind of in around 20 years ago. Social media has definitely contributed to it because people rush to go on social media to take a quote out of context, or they might just put the start of an answer and then cut the video. People, sports people are so guarded. It's kind of ruined the whole thing, and it impacts on the product you put out. So it just means you have to work harder. It means you have to try and analyze other stuff around it because, sports people, they are media trained, and it's a fact that sports people at the highest level are taught how to deal with questions and how to deal with the media. It's why if you're watching, say, Match of the Day on a Saturday night on BBC, all the players give the same answers, and if one player kind of gives an honest answer, it's sort of jarring to hear it. You've lost today. Has that ruined your title hopes? well, we can only take it one game at a time. Obviously, we're very disappointed today, but we'll go into training tomorrow. We'll discuss what happened, and there's no point in getting down about it. They say absolutely nothing. Back in the day, they might have been likely to, criticize the teammate or have a go at the referee. Now they're all terrified of saying anything about an official because they're afraid to get fined. So everything has been sanitized to within an inch of its life. So because for several reasons, social media doesn't help. The organizations want to be squeaky clean for advertisers. That filters its way down to the players. The players are let know what their responsibilities are, and it just leads to this distance between sports people and journalists. But even more importantly, I think it leaves this distance between sports people and the fans, the people who pay their wages.
I've heard some of the best stories I've ever heard in sport, like things like Jack Charlton used to write checks around the place, and it was partly because he knew in restaurants and stuff, because he knew there was a chance that there. It's a taxi story. I heard
they wouldn't cash it; they'd frame it.
Exactly, they'd frame it. So he there's several like framed Jack Charlton checks around Ireland, and those are the kind of the character stories, and there's an element of genius behind the strategy as well. But it's that's I feel like that is dying a little bit in sport. But it's interesting.
To be honest with you, when I realised we gone beyond the point of no return, was when I started seeing it seeping into the GAA. Amateur sports media training their players. So that's not a criticism of the GAA. I'm a huge fan. That was just when I realized. That was when I really hit home. Okay, there's brilliant interviews are gone for the most part. For the most part, there are exceptions when a sports person will seek out a journalist. For example, Paul Kimmage in the Sunday Independent, he always gets high level sports people to open up to him. Whether it be Rory McIlroy or even Gary O'Toole from the swimming point of view after there was a swimming scandal a few years ago. So there are like top level journalists who some sports people, if they really want to open up, they go to them. But those sort of things are the exception. It's hard not to place too fine an emphasis on it because sports people are looking after themselves and they're looking after their own needs, and sure, that's all the journalists and reporters are doing too. It's just a shame because you're acutely aware of it from our point of view that it's you can't fill an article with bland quotes, so you a lot of the time you don't even use them at all, or you might just use one of them to fill up like a line.
And to bring it back to like your methods, is there any particular softwares that you use that really enhance your work, or is there any tips that you could have for inspiring journalists or copywriters?
What's up, Angry Designers? My name's Massimo, and I'm the host of the Angry Designer Podcast, a no-bull design podcast that cuts through the industry crap to help frustrated designers survive and thrive. Our podcast covers typical things like design, trends, and technology, but we also cover some of the more difficult topics like burnout, ageism, pain in the ass customers, and even the general ridiculousness of our industry. Let us do the venting for you. Click on the link in the show notes to check out our podcast, or visit us on your favorite podcast app at The Angry Designer. Stay angry, our friends.
There's no we edit articles through InCopy, which is the non-design element of InDesign, and that's for print. And then we use now we're placing things online. We use software called ACT. It's just geared towards putting stuff online straight away. It doesn't necessarily enhance our process or make things any easier. It's more the software we use. I really would say that sub editors and people in the industry, it's a great industry, but if you want to get into, even like from my point of view, sub editing, multi-channel sub editing, or writing, you just need to do all you can to be good at it. So whether that's reading a lot, whether it's staying on top of the news. I know a lot of young people now, when you see in polls, aren't they're getting a lot of their news from social media feeds. They're not reading traditional news sources. You could say I'm biased, but I don't think that's a healthy thing. And I think if you want to get involved in traditional news, you need to be aware of what's being reported, how it's being reported. Uh, Notice how the articles are written. Notice how few mistakes you see. You might see a mistake if there's a breaking news story and it has to be put up online straight away because it's been written in a rush. Then you might see a typo here and there. But my advice to aspiring young sub-editors, journalists, page designers, people who have ambitions to go all the way to the top and be newspaper editor-in-chiefs, immerse yourself in the news. Don't just expect to get your news from retweets on Twitter or TikTok or Facebook feeds. Get a subscription. Be it the Irish Independent. I have to say that first because I'm employed by them. But get a subscription. Be it that or another newspaper. Or get a subscription to an internationally renowned organization like the New York Times. But absolutely immerse yourself in it. Don't just expect to be ready to walk into the industry without having created your own background in it. And there is an element that you get better on the job as well. So young people are. I was given an opportunity years ago. I was far from the finished article, but you have to meet that with a huge level of enthusiasm and a desire.
Yeah.
Much like many industries,
Yeah, and really well said. Is there any areas you're looking to upskill yourself in at the moment,
Ronan? I just have a desire at the moment to write a book. So I don't that doesn't come into the upskill area. I went back to college a few years ago in 2017 to 2018 and did a master's in journalism. So that was just something I wanted for myself after I'd done a higher national diploma all the years earlier. I just wanted to add to it, so I got my master's a few years ago. Education wise, there's nothing I'm looking at the moment. I have an idea I'm working on book wise, but it's in the early research stage at the moment. It's sports based, so hopefully in the next year or two I'll have something concrete on that, and I'd be pretty happy. That's a personal project that I'm working on, and that'd be a big part of my focus at the moment outside of the office.
Yeah, my ears pricked when you said that, to be honest, Ronan. I think those kind of things I find really exciting, and I'd love to hear about the book when it's being created. But I suppose it might be something you're aware of right now or not, but to get a book published, obviously with your contacts and your networks over time, but is there a good go-to-market strategy for someone that might want to get a book published in Ireland in particular?
Yeah, well, it's straightforward, and it's not straightforward at all. There are traditional publishing companies here in Ireland, like Penguin, which is obviously a global one as well. But we have the Irish here, and there's a few other Gill Books, there's the Liffey Press. That's just to name but a few. So there's probably 8 to 10 viable publishing companies here. If you're writing a book, more of them seem to be interested in non-fiction than fiction. But if you're writing a book either way, a lot of the time, it's about reaching out to them, and they don't want to hear your idea. They want to see proposals. So a lot of them either want kind of 3 chapters of your book, or 10,000 words, whichever is greater or whatever. Anyway, that sort of area. They want to be bowled over by your writing. They will read it, but it will take them a number of months to get back to you. There's no. They are becoming pickier and pickier, and that's largely because, one aspect is because, say, the cost of paper has just gone through the roof. The printing costs have gone up 300% since the war in Ukraine started. So obviously there's elements like that involved, but and their pickiness and their choosiness has also led to a lot of people going down the self-publishing route. So you see an awful lot of people with books on Amazon that haven't been published by a traditional publishing company, that have been self-published. Um, there's huge benefits for that in that anyone can produce a book. The drawbacks are that sometimes you might see that the book has typos. It hasn't got the editorial standards associated with a book that's gone through all of that. It doesn't get the sort of marketing push that a book with a traditional publishing company would get. But yeah, but when I'm looking to get my project published, I will look to make the most of the fact that I've been involved in the media, but I will just be going down the traditional route of submitting my proposal.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you covered that, because the digital side of things I was going to ask as well, and you covered it wonderfully. I suppose before I ask you the last question on the show, um, when as a journalist, you obviously probably get connected to and reached out to all the time for opportunities or businesses getting placements and stuff. From a external point of view, to businesses, let's say sports people or something, trying to get attention, get, let's say, traditional PR out there, what would you deem as a journalist the appropriate way and the best way, I suppose, of getting your story into the media, or getting a message that you feel is worthy into the wider market?
If you have a good sports story and it's good, and you believe in your heart it's good, not just a good sports story, a good news story, and it's good, and you have confidence in it, and you believe it's that there will be a media organization worth paying for this. You decide who you want to sell it to first and foremost, or who you want to print it. If it's a sports story, you go to the organization, you find out who the sports editor is, you contact them, you tell them the story. And if you can't get them on the phone, you get their email address, you contact them, you put them in you make it clear straight away you've got a good story in the subject line, and explain yourself. That is the traditional way it's always been done, and that tradition holds. Sometimes it's hard to get somebody on the phone, but you'll get their contact details, and if you're freelance, don't limit yourself to the amount of people you try to sell it to, because some people mightn't get back to you. But if you've got a good story and it's worth publishing, people will get back to you. It's got to be good though. You can't be wishy-washy about it. You have to have a concrete story, straight to the point. And then you need to, if it's sport, find out who the sports editor is of a certain newspaper. If he or she is off, find out who the deputy sports editor is. Same if it's a news story, and news is a more broad thing. That covers, current affairs, crime, even culture. Find out who the news editor is. Find out who the deputy news editor is. Get their contact details. Contact them, and don't beat around the bush. Make it clear straight away you've got a good story, and you're proposing it to other organizations as well. So if you could let me know, please, because I'm waiting for other people to get back to me. But don't be shy about it. Reach out. Put yourself out there. Don't mean to sound like a sort of older ahead of my time here, but there is a reluctance I notice on younger people to pick up the phone. Pick up the phone, get contact people. It will always be better if you can get somebody over the phone. It is much more effective than getting them on an email. Now, if you can't get them on the phone, email is better than nothing. But it's so much more personal. You build a rapport straight away. If you can get someone on the phone, get them on the phone.
Really good advice. Thank you, Ronan. Lastly, we always try and understand the people behind the roles a little bit more. And the question I ask is, if you could bottle up one personality trait that you have yourself, Ronan, that you could pass on to others, what would it be?
It's sort of cliched when people say they're like a perfectionist. But if there's one job you need to be like a perfectionist, or the closest thing to it, I don't necessarily think it's possible to be a perfectionist as a human being. But if there's one role where you need to be a perfectionist, other than say a brain surgeon, it's a sub editor, because it's our job to be absolute sticklers down to the most minute detail. So reporters might be in a rush and they'll send in their copy. They'll send in their articles knowing that they have this line of defense, the editorial team in the office, and that's fair enough. That's how the industry works. So it's the part of my personality where I'm just a complete stickler, a perfectionist. Absolutely check everything, question everything. Don't, if something just like, raises a red flag in your mind, check it, check it, check it. Every single fact, every single spelling of an unusual name, check absolutely everything. So that'd be my sort of stickler mentality, which I think goes well with the role I have.
That's fantastic. Ronan, thank you so much for being on the show. If people want to reach out to you, get in touch with you, maybe even follow up or publish your book in the future, how can they get in touch with you?
I suppose LinkedIn's always a good one, isn't it?
It's a solid, yeah. It's always a solid one to reach out, yeah.
LinkedIn's a good one. I have a Twitter account, Ronan O'Flaherty. It's just my name. I don't use it quite as much as I used to. I go through phases. Sometimes I go on social media and I think the world is burning. I have to take a break from it for a while. So I'm sort of sporadic in my use with that. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Always happy to offer advice if anyone wants a bit, So yeah, reach out.
Ronan, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks very much, Thomas.